Hold up, I ain't trying to stump, man, but the Yeezys jumped over the jump, man. I be in and out of arenas like I'm Scottie Pippen.
Left my elbow in the pot, a la Vince Carter.
Bitch, you wasn't with me shooting in the gym?
James Harden with the range on me, nigga, way back.
Coach, they won't knock me off my pivot, get it.
Been flowing stupid since Vince Carter was on some through the legs arm and a hoop shit.
And you could live through anything if magic made it.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know, now you do.
Yes, sir. Lovers of the association, we are back. Round of applause for yourselves. Man, what an interesting NBA season that's about to embark on us. Kawhi Leonard during media days making a lot of rounds where he just kind of was oblivious to the new rest rules. But that's like the lightest part of the whole conversation. A lot of the media members missed out the fact that he called out most of the NBA players throughout the league, imitating him by acting like they had an injury. But of course, in this new clickbait landscape that we live in, the media just went along with the soundbite of just Kawhi not knowing the new rest policy. Because ever since he had that quadricep injury he had with the Spurs, it's been pretty much downhill. Guy's barely been there. He played about 60 games for the Raptors, and ever since back-to-backs, he's really not playing them at all. But before we get to Kawhi's soundbite during the presser, you're gonna hear the fact that he does call out NBA players imitating him. He's not there just to watch. He actually has an injury, which is true. But unfortunately for him and Paul George, the referendum is in on these guys, especially with these new cap rules approaching. Kawhi has been extension eligible since July and Paul George in September. And I'm pretty sure while going through negotiations with Steve Ballmer, they're not exactly in the driver's seat. And make no mistake about it, Steve Ballmer, you know, he's always acting like, oh, he's so down for Kawhi, so down for PG-13. But at the end of the day, when these owners had sat down and they didn't even need the Players Association to vote on these team punishments for resting players, best believe Steve Ballmer was definitely on the side of the owners with that. But let's get to the Kawhi soundbite and see what he had to say.
Fox 11. Would love to hear your thoughts on the new NBA player participation policy.
What are they?
Just, you know, I know that you've gotten a lot of flack for, you know, load management and just, you know.
Kawhi has never participated in load management. He actually has an injury. And this is sort of the sentiment he tries to get across. He's definitely annoyed during this presser.
Only resting certain players, you know, in certain situations. So just would love to hear your thoughts on that.
I just don't know the policy. What is the policy though? Just
okay. I'm going to ask you a different question if that's okay.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. No, it's totally okay. Just would love to know how you're feeling if you did anything different.
Yo, Kawhi is interesting because the media does not understand Kawhi at all. Players like him, they don't understand what ticked them off, especially in this social media era where guys kind of put their whole lives on Front Street, their insecurities, things that they like, things that they're into. Kawhi does none of that, and it throws the media off. Unlike KD, they don't know his weak points, and that makes a lot of people uncomfortable. Kawhi seems like he's pretty much secure in himself. During this presser, Kawhi Leonard did call out other players throughout the league who just go through load management, end up playing the next game. But it just went over everyone's head because it's just the way he said it.
It's basketball. I'm a two-way player. Play hard, so injuries are going to come up. I'm not out there just walking around. I play both ends of the floor. I see the best players on both ends every night. I'm a meniscus, and I mean, that's just it's basketball. I'm a two-way player. Well, at least me. I'm not trying to get to a certain amount of games. I'm trying to play the games that I can play. But if I'm hurt, I can't play basketball. So the last 2 years been unfortunately for me. I got hurt, tore my ACL. Then at the end of the year, tore my meniscus. And I mean, that's just it's basketball. I'm a two-way player. Play hard, so injuries are going to come up. I'm not out there just walking around. I play both ends of the floor. I see the best players on both ends every night. Either I'm guarding the best player or the best player is guarding me. So whatever happens with that, if injury comes, that's what happens. I'm in NBA.
Kawhi right there letting a lot of media members know he's not like the rest of these guys. He actually plays defense. But during this presser, Kawhi is reaching that irritation point with the questions about load management.
League policy, I think the gist of it is that they want their top 50 stars out on the floor every night if possible. And given that, I'm just wondering if you feel an obligation to play every game.
No, I mean, I'm not a guy that's sitting down because I'm doing a load management. When I was with the Raptors, it was different. Like, I was coming from an injury, and you have to know the details of a doctor. But if the league is seeing or trying to mock what I did with the Raptors, then they should stop because I was injured during that whole year. But other than that, if I'm able to play, I'll play basketball.
He said if the league continues to mock him, he's talking about the rest of the players. The league is mocking him, thinking his load management is not. I'm going to play that one more time. He's talking about the players when he says the league. He's not talking about the front office just kind of, making fun of him, coming up with these rules. He's talking about the rest of the players.
Like, I was coming from an injury, and you have to know the details of a doctor. But if the league is seeing or trying to mock what I did with the Raptors, then they should stop because I was injured during that whole year. But other than that, if I'm able to play, I'll play basketball.
Surprisingly, during media day, they didn't have Kawhi elaborate more on that statement that he made right there when he referred to other players just imitating him. Because with the quadricep injury he had when he was in Toronto, he still ended up playing 60 games. But just the back-to-backs were super limited or almost non-existent. But the only flaw Kawhi and PG-13 in this whole Clippers fiasco was actually not taking advantage of the bubble. The bubble in 2020 was their moment to win a championship. Due to circumstances of injuries outside of their control, they just never had another opportunity to get in that same position to be very close to winning a championship. That bubble was just, it was their shot. They were healthy. Just the lack of focus, maybe nobody wanted to be in that bubble. Guys wanted out. As we see Lou Williams, a lot of like long 10-year Clipper guys, they were off that team after that. Patrick Beverly, and they all stated just there was a lack of focus. And that really was their opportunity. So if Steve Ballmer is kind of hesitant about giving these guys their money, it really comes down to that, just that was a complete fuck up. And they just haven't had another opportunity since. And with this new CBA kicking in, Steve Ballmer has Kawhi and PG both with player options entering to 2024-25. I don't know if PG-13 and Kawhi are going to be in the driver's seat renegotiating. And I'm not sure Steve Ballmer, especially with the cap hit, spending a lot of money, it has nothing to do with it. The league just restrains you from making any moves if you're over $17 million over the cap. So with the Clippers having a lot of angst approaching this season before the new CBA, I would say desperate times equals desperate measures. And Steve Ballmer has kind of issued a contingency plan, as for a long time, Josh Primo, he's been in LA, man. He's been working out. The Clippers have been taking a look at him. It seems like they've been in communication for a while. And the Clippers have been sort of kind of grooming Primo to be with the team, but they just didn't know how to roll it out. It's all about the marketing. Once again, the NBA is about 60% marketing, 30% business, and 10% basketball. And this could be almost a blessing in disguise for the Clippers to kind of get them over this hump and kind of regalvanize this bench, as Josh Primo was drafted 12th overall by San Antonio, and he only appeared in about 50 games. So the Clippers said that they had talks with female employees and consulted with them about this whole situation, which is a ton of bullshit. It's all about optics. And they're sort of treading waters in this very sensitive social media landscape where everyone just has an opinion and things could go viral and go left real fast. But they're sort of taking the Jerry Jones approach, that they want to win by any means necessary, and they're willing to sign guys with checkered past. As we've seen the Dallas Cowboys and Jerry Jones do this multiple times. And I don't blame Steve Ballmer. It's definitely a contingency plan, but just to make the statements that you've had to speak to female employees, I mean, they're making this guy seem like he's a complete Hannibal Lecter or some shit. The NBA did investigate the situation with Primo, and they found that he didn't do anything sexually, but he might have exposed himself, quote unquote, by accident a few times. So if he was such a danger where you had to consult female employees, why invite him inside the building? Even the suspension by the league, 4-game suspension. Like, it's like the way they're rolling this out to welcome him back in the league, they're making him seem like he needed psychiatric help. But yet the punishment doesn't match up. 4-game suspension, it just doesn't add up. If it was that bad, there would have been more games on his head. But there's a lot of question marks with the Clippers, especially going forward with the cap limitations. But let's see what Lawrence Frank had to say, the Clippers president.
We've spent a great deal of time for the last several months with Josh, he said. We've had specialists who we consult with who've evaluated Josh, and the reason why we're moving forward is, based on their confidence level after the evaluations and what he's doing currently, they feel he can be a positive contributor to the organization moving forward. We're not disputing allegations or condoning the alleged conduct.
That's social media language right there. We're not disputing allegations. The fact that they even have to say stuff like that, they got to be very sensitive, especially the women that were running that company that worked with the Spurs that had the allegations against Primo. I don't want to say they're very woke. I should say that they are very woke for real. I mean, some of the key words they use in that press conference, I'm a woman first, and they use a lot of key woke terms. So they're trying to signal, they're kind of throwing virtue signals out to activate their supporters. And I also wonder if that same company those two women were in charge of, if they ever got any other NBA clients afterwards. Because the Spurs were probably their most highest profile clients. But just moving on, yeah, these are very sensitive times. But this whole rollout, it makes Josh Primo look crazy. I'm wondering what he's thinking.
We're not disputing allegations or condoning the alleged conduct, but why we're here is because of all the work he's put in since those allegations, Frank said. He added that this isn't about Josh performing right now. This is about him continuing to do the work off the court to try to earn another opportunity. He's done a lot of work off the court, and with it, we feel he's worthy of another opportunity.
And they would know that because he spent most of his time in LA. I'm telling you, the Clippers been trying to figure out if they should bite into this probably for the last 2 years. And they got to do it now because, like I said, desperate times equals desperate measures. They got to see where this is going. And more than likely, I believe, Paul George and Kawhi, if things begin to go left, they're just going to opt in. They're going to opt in, and the Clippers are not going to have too much breathing room to add players into that roster without going over the $17 million threshold.
He's done a lot of work off the court, and with it, we feel he's worthy of another opportunity.
And he should get a second chance, but it's just the way they're rolling this out. They're just damaging this guy's image completely. I mean, the fact that you have to hire a guy who's super talented, 12th overall, who doesn't really have any criminal charges against him. But the way you roll him out, you have to ask female employees if they're going to be comfortable with him in the building. Like, come on. Come on. But with Steve Ballmer, desperate times equals desperate measures. When he first came into the NBA, just inflating the price of teams. By buying the Clippers, when they had that issue with Donald Sterling, he inflated the price of teams around the league. And he probably thought for a second that he could buy his way into an NBA championship. And for the past few seasons, man, he's looking back at that bubble and is like, how the fuck did we miss that opportunity? But Primo's a great contingency plan. I'm wondering if it's going to bring that same spark to your bench that Lou Williams and Patrick Beverley had. So Dame getting traded to the Bucks caught the whole league by storm. But for those of us who remember Dame and a lot of his playoff performances, him and CJ, and the true player archetype of these two guys who are volume shooters, who are pretty much small, don't really play a lot of defense. Some of us have a few questions on how well Dame would actually fit in with the Bucks defensively. And does he leave Giannis to actually do more work? I mean, sometimes as a superstar, you can ask for another trade for another star, but damn, sometimes you're signing up to do more work. And I believe Giannis is definitely doing more work. But George Karl spoke on Damian Lillard, and he actually spoke about how the talent level between Dame and CJ is going to be surprisingly different for the Bucks, and it may not actually work as well. You see, there's a huge difference in Dame and Drew Holiday's name recognition. There's a huge difference in that. When we talk about the talent level, that shit's a lot closer than we think. Let's see what George Karl had to say.
Do you think the Bucks will be better in the regular season? And do you feel like in the postseason they could really miss Holiday's defense?
I agree 100%. I talked to someone last night about, I think Lillard probably makes them more exciting, more explosive. I think he'll go in there with some excitement being on a team that can win the championship. But to be honest with you, in the playoffs, Holiday might be better than Lillard.
And definitely, let's not forget, Drew Holiday definitely swept Damian Lillard and the Blazers during the playoffs 4-0. Him and AD. And Drew Holiday was cooking in that series. You guys can go back and look at the highlights yourselves. Drew Holiday was not only locking him and CJ up, but he was killing CJ and Dame in the offensive end also.
And statistically, that won't prove out. But the intangibles that Holiday brings to the game, that's what wins playoff games. The little things, the defensive ability to move around and cover different players. And I think you got to give Holiday some credit. He became a pretty good offensive player last year.
And he definitely has. The gap between the two is not that far off, especially when you look at Drew Holiday's intangibles, running through screens, his switchability, willing to, guard different players. Dame doesn't do any of those things. And in the playoffs, those things definitely do matter. And when you look at their rivalry, which is the Boston Celtics, where the Blazers were able to flip Drew Holiday and send him to the Bucks rival. This is where this trade gets super interesting. I could understand if Drew Holiday stayed in the West, but the fact that he was sent right back to the East to be the main rival of the Bucks, this is where this trade kind of came back and kind of bit the Bucks in the ass. At first, it looked like a complete win, but then when you found out Drew Holiday was going to your rival, this is where things kind of took a turn for the worse. It's still a great trade, but the trade went from like a guaranteed win to now this could be 50-50. I mean, Jesus, you just looking at the Celtics backcourt. Oh man, you talking about Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and Drew Holiday? That's gonna be problems for Giannis, man, during the playoffs. Dame is not defending those guys, and all three of those guys together, they could definitely shut Dame down, especially offensively. Dame is really not that efficient. He's not gonna get that same green light to chuck up all those shots that he's used to taking. But going back to George Karl, funny thing about him, he's one of these coaches that was active in the NBA between two different eras. And especially when he coached Carmelo Anthony, that was the beginning when the NBA started just off rip, giving young players who had name recognition the keys to the franchise, off rip. And George Karl used to always make a fuss about Melo's defense, his willingness not to learn how to play or just put in the effort on the defensive end was always a major issue. And even back then, he stated at times that the league was definitely going in a different directions where the young star players coming in just off rip were given the keys to the franchise, and they were giving too many perks. They were giving way too many perks. And he's definitely not off when he speaks about the talent gap between Dame and Drew Holiday, especially in the playoffs. It's definitely not that far off. Now, the greatest little man of all time, former bad boy Piston, had given Mark Jackson credit for evolutionizing the NBA game by making it acceptable for players to take almost half-court three-point shots. Now, I always say this, the NBA game is a television product. And to somewhat, I agree with Isiah Thomas here, but at the same time, the NBA is always going to be an entertainment product first. So this three-point evolution has changed the game, but at the same time, I believe the league is tweaking the product year to year, as we've seen the past few seasons, in order to make it more viewable. Because this three-point evolution, it may be great for the game, but I believe it's a bad television product. But Isiah Thomas spoke about it. You guys check it out, and every once in a while, I'll check in.
What has changed in the guy who doesn't get credit for changing the game in this so-called evolution of the game? his name would be Coach Mark Jackson. Now, let me tell you why Mark Jackson changed the game. Because Mark Jackson saw a guy by the name of Steph Curry and a guy by the name of Klay Thompson. And Mark Jackson, as a coach, made it acceptable. He made it acceptable for Steph Curry and Klay to shoot from that range. People always shot from that range. They just didn't do it as part of their offensive schemes.
Mm-hmm.
Mark Jackson solely accepted Steph and Klay shooting from that distance, from that range, during crucial parts of the game. Value.
Yeah,
that's what I'm getting at. So
Mm-hmm.
so the one who has power gives definition to. And the one who has power can also allow things to happen. We came up, and when we were playing, our coaches, that wasn't acceptable to shoot from that distance or play that way.
And nowadays it is acceptable depending on the generation. The kids that grew up in high school, anywhere from 20, 14, 15, 16, and the younger kids maybe in elementary school, that is a very acceptable way to play. And you see it play out through all the AAU tournaments. You look at the leagues. You don't see it necessarily in college because the guys have to play in a certain framework. But you do see a lot of babies off that tree, like LaMelo Ball, Trae Young. They're all babies off the Stephen Curry tree. They all grew up watching him play. So right now, that is an acceptable thing. But particularly if the younger generation do play with an older generation, let's say in the basketball court in the park, they will do that. And to a lot of people who did not grow up in that era, that is a very unacceptable shot.
It just wasn't acceptable. Mark Jackson alone accepted. And when he accepted,
That changed the game.
that changed the game. Steph Curry, Klay Thompson would not be Steph Curry, Klay Thompson getting credit for evolution if there wasn't a teacher and a master saying, you can do that.
And the problem is that a lot of teams, they call it a copycat league for a reason, tries to imitate what Stephen Curry and Klay Thompson does. But unfortunately for them, they do not have those type of players who could shoot at that type of efficiency, aka Trae Young. He's a victim of this all the time.
I never forget watching Golden State play OKC, and Klay Thompson pulled up, dude, in the pressure situation. The pressure situation from the hash mark. Bam!
Yeah.
Now, Mark Jackson wasn't coaching then, but the thought,
Oh, yeah, it was too late.
the,
It was
the
gone by then.
acceptability, right? That's we watching Kevin Durant in Cleveland come down and LeBron James waiting for him. And Kevin Durant stopped 3 feet from behind. Boom!
Eyeball sandwiches.
And they asked LeBron James, what was the difference between last year and this year? He said, KD.
Yeah, for real.
You know,
Durant.
but Mark Jackson, in my opinion, when you say the evolution of the game and the three-point shot, his name
should be,
he's the one who changed the game. He's the one who made it acceptable from a coaching standpoint to not allow you
I
to
never thought
shoot
about
from
that.
there,
Yeah, me neither at all.
but allow you to miss from there.
It wasn't the shooting, like you said, it was the misses.
It's the misses.
You can't keep missing that
Can't
shot
keep
now.
missing. Now we see guys. I saw Steph come back his first game after being injured one time, and he went 3 for 16 in Portland from the three-point line.
And it's very unfortunate because there is a correlation between Steph going 3 for 16, because a lot of teams who don't have Stephen Curry do that from night to night. And it's definitely a correlation between the league having a lot of low ratings, especially on a local TV level, for a lot of these teams that are trying to imitate this type of style of play. And during that 2015 to like 2018 era, when that three-point shot first became an acceptable shot to take, there were a lot of teams getting blown out. Once again, the NBA product is a television product, so the league definitely is doing things to try to tweak that and tries to stop all these blowouts from happening. Because if you look back around that time frame between the years of 2015 and 2018, especially during the regular season, there were a lot of teams being blown out by halftime because they tried to imitate what Steph and Klay Thompson does. Once again, they don't call it a copycat league for no reason.
It's acceptable now.
16 of them boys.
It's acceptable now, right? You know, you can go 1 for 10 and say, I'm going to get hot. Mark Jackson changed the game.
But at the end of the day, for those of you who play pickup games at your local parks, you kind of see this thing play out. As sometimes, you know, of course, different generations play together on teams, and you'll see particularly younger players take acceptable half-court shots to them, and you see older players tend to get frustrated. It's definitely a generational thing, but keep in mind that the NBA is a television product, and all this three-point shooting has made the game pretty predictable, and not every single team has Stephen Curry and Klay Thompson on it. So sometimes watching some of these games, it's a very tough watch. But kudos to Mark Jackson for evolutionizing the game, especially with the players that he has. But that's where the ball should really stop. Because from an entertainment standpoint, the game on television has become pretty predictable, and sometimes it's hard to watch. All right, so before I go, you fellas definitely hit up the mailbag in the link below. Leave me a voicemail with your questions. We'll definitely go over in the show. And until next time, you fellas stay safe. Peace.